So in the 19th century, many Europeans, mathematicians and otherwise also got interested in the study of ancient Indian mathematics. Many of the topics that you heard about today are covered in that. So Shilpa Sutras, George Thibault was mentioned by Professor Dalir in his talk. There's also Burke, who from the Apastamba Shilpa Sutra. Then the Siddhanta Astronomy, on which we had various talks. There's the well-known book of Colebrook. There's also other people among the names that you see on the screen. Rode was mentioned again in Professor Dalil's talk. There's also a few other names. There's J.R.K., who is known for somewhat his critical comments on various things, and Lancelot Wilkinson. Then there are also the Kerala mathematics, Charles Bish and others, some of which was recalled by Professor Ramasubramanian. Then there are also general historians who laid some emphasis on the Indian mathematics. There's Moritz Cantor, David Eugene Smith, for instance, is also known for his forward to the Ganita Sara Sangraha of Mahaviracharya that was edited by Rangacharya in 1912, so early 20th century. Florian Kayori is also one of the in that. Soon enough, many Indians were also were to make a dent in the activity, and they were to participate in that. And that's the part that we are going to talk about here. One of the earliest names is Bapudev Shastri. He is one of the very prominent early figures. He's a native of Nagpur, and he was brought. Lancelot Wilkinson was an officer of the East India Company. He spotted him on his visit in Nagpur, and was quite impressed with him, and brought him to Sihor, where actually the East India Company was running school in the modern style. But actually, unlike many other Britishers, Lancelot Wilkinson was someone who believed that the education system in India should be Sanskrit based, or based in the native ethos. And that's how he was trying to work it out. And Sihor School was one of his sort of major efforts, and where he himself also taught. So Wilkinson is seen to be full of praise for the ability of Bapudev Shastri, and raves about how quickly and well he could absorb Euler's book on algebra, which was kind of the standard of at that time in some way. And he also comments on how Bapudev Shastri could blend the traditional works, especially the work of, especially from Bhaskaracharya, with modern learning. I mean, so you should sort of keep in mind that at that time, Bhaskaracharya's work, I mean, the Siddhanta Shiromani and the more pure mathematical parts of it incorporated in Lilavati and Bijaganita were kind of the flag bearers of the mainstream learning in the traditional setup. And yeah, so Wilkinson is commenting about Bapudev Shastri being able to blend the traditional knowledge into the modern learning, and in fact that was sort of one of Wilkinson's principal interests as well. Now, Bapudev Shastri got an appointment in the Banaras Government College, which later became the Sampurnananda Sanskrit Vishwavidyalaya, and he rose to eminence as interpreter of Sanskrit astronomical texts. I mean, they're not. I mean, so, though of course some of the things had been translated and edited and so on, a lot more needed to be done. And Bapudev Shastri was also kind of instrumental in starting this activity. I'm going to say a little more about that. Among his recognitions, in 1887, he was awarded the title Mahotsav was by the then British government. Now, here is a picture which one can see online of Mahotsav Shastri, and here the noticeable thing about it is is a globe here. So there are some aspects of this picture that's more difficult to understand. I don't comment about that. Anyway, there it is. So, and it is from 1870. That is something that can keep in mind. Now, among Mahotsav Shastri wrote many books in Sanskrit. Sanskrit was the medium of instruction at the scholarly discourse in India at that time. I mean, at this point, it might sort of seem difficult to imagine, but I mean, already in the 19th century, in the Sanskrit was something that to keep in mind. Sanskrit was the kind of language of scholarly exchanges and so on. So now, while some of these works were expositions of modern mathematics in Sanskrit, and these including geometry in the name being used as Rekha Ganita, and trigonometry, that is trigonometry. Others were a blend of methods from the Siddhanta tradition of Aryabhata, Brahmagupta, and Bhaskara, and so on, especially from Bhaskaracharya, and with the modern approach. Is known for his translation of the Surya Siddhanta into English, and publication of a corrected version of the English translation of Siddhanta Shiromani. This was prepared by Wilkinson. I've noted here in parenthesis that Wilkinson died in 1841 prematurely at just the age of 36, and that work was completed by Mahotsav Shastri. Now, Mahotsav Shastri is also known for his commentaries on Lilavati and the other parts of Siddhanta Shiromani. I think both Ganita and Gola chapters. There's probably some confusion about whether all of this was done, but there's a good deal of good part of Siddhanta Shiromani was translated by him. The second person that I'll come to is Sudhakar Dwivedi. He's, I think, it's a sort of more mature phase in this development, following the work of Sudhakar Dwivedi. I mean, so following the work of Mahotsav Shastri, about whom I mentioned the last few minutes. Now, yeah. So Sudhakar Dwivedi studied in the Banaras Sanskrit College, Banaras, the seat of learning at that time. They under the tutelage of Pandit Devakrishna, professor of Jyotisha. So Jyotisha was the key holder of the knowledge of mathematics, for instance, even as late as the 19th century. He also had the benefit of knowing Mahotsav Shastri, who was also taught in that college. In 1883, Sudhakar Dwivedi was appointed chief librarian of the college. Now, this was a big boon because the library, Saraswati Bhavan, which was very rich in manuscripts, and this provided him a great opportunity to for the scholarly pursuits, and he made good use of it, and it was very beneficial for their activity as a whole. Now, Sudhakar Dwivedi wrote many books. This is not only, I'm not talking only about Indian mathematics, but also introducing modern mathematics in Sanskrit. So, and later in Hindi. So the development was that Sanskrit gradually gave way to Hindi, especially in the, perhaps mainly in the in North India, and gradually Hindi began to get currency as the medium of scholarly medium of higher learning, so to speak. So and So some of his books, initial books, are in Sanskrit, some of the later ones, and are in Hindi. So there's notably a book on differential calculus in Hindi, which appeared in 1886. This book, I noted here, book, of course, it cannot be compared with in terms of standard with modern books of calculus, but I think it gave a very good exposition of the subject. He was, I mentioned the transition from Sanskrit to Hindi, and Sudhakar Dwivedi was himself an enthusiast for in promoting Hindi, and did a good deal to propagate it. So he was also conferred the title Mahotsav, and that was in 87. I think that was around when the title was distributed, and was appointed Professor of Mathematics and Astronomy at the Government Sanskrit College upon retirement of Bapudeva Shastri. So he succeeded Bapudeva Shastri not only academically in some sense, but even in terms of administrative leadership and so on. So which established some continuity in the process. Now, here is a picture of Sudhakar Dwivedi, fairly well known. Yeah. The works of Sudhakar Dwivedi. Now, we would have Panchasiddhantika of Varahamira is a well-known book in the Siddhanta tradition. Don't recall if it was mentioned in some of the lectures today, but it is something very important. And currently the principal, one of the early sources is a book produced by Siddhanta Dwivedi and George Thibault. This book is much cited, and it's sort of still a basis to some extent in the study of that segment of the tradition. So this was reprinted in Lahore in 1930, and again in 1968 at Varanasi. Dwivedi also had his own edition with commentary and called Lakshika, and with English tradition. The Panchasiddhantika is a treatise. I mentioned its importance. This is it's dated from 575 CE. Note that this is sort of a little before Brahmagupta and the Bhaskara the first. So it's on mathematical astronomy, and it summarizes 5 earlier astronomical treatises, the origins of which are now lost. We know about the earlier works only through Panchasiddhantika. The 5 Siddhantas are Surya Siddhanta, Romaka Siddhanta, Paulusha Siddhanta, Vishishta Siddhanta, and Paitama Siddhanta. And the book is not simply an explanation, it's a kind of critical appreciation of the knowledge contained in these works. It's a blend of astronomy in the Vedic tradition from the Vedanga Jyotisha, and also the Hellenistic astronomy, which had major influence on India at that time. The book of Dwivedi and Thibault contains, this I already said, contains a critical review of the work and has been much cited. Yeah. Another notable work is Ganaka Tarangini. Now, this is a unique book. It's in Sanskrit on the lives and works of Indian astronomers and mathematicians. It was composed in 1890. And first appeared in serialized form in the monthly journal called Pandit. Pandit happens to be have been a major journal at that time, especially in the ancient India related works of in various subjects. The papers of Thibaut and Shilva Sutra, for instance, also appeared in Pandit. There have been, okay, so going back to Ganakatarangini, there have been many posthumous editions of this, including recently, and I think it's probably still available in print. There are, the book has 73 biographical sketches, and these are listed alphabetically and, listed chronologically. That is the oldest first and so on. Starting with Aryabhatta. Aryabhatta, you know, is from 476 CE, which corresponds to 398 from the Shaka era, including also the 73 figure includes also Bapudev Shastri, and Bapudev Shastri is not the last one. There are also a couple of more names, related names coming into the picture. So the sketches usually they are some of them are short, maybe a paragraph, not a full page, not page, but some of them go into a few pages. The description proceeds systematically in three parts. So the details about birth and family background, etc. So then some highlights of the work, and finally a short review of the work, including brief comments on the merits and shortcomings, the special points about the work, etc. The well, I'm not writing many comments on that. I think it's probably better to look at it in the original. There are however, so there are some notable omissions in that, which is somewhat difficult to explain. And that is the Bhaskara the first. Then Mahavira and Narayana Pandita also are not mentioned, and somehow this may have something to do with the overall knowledge about these works. Some of these works mentioned in North India. I mean, there's a sort of North Indian base involved here, and some of the omissions may have to do with that aspect. So and also the name of Madhava is also missing. That is not included in the write-up here, but there is the name Parameshwara occurs, but it's kind of in a sort of very vague way, and I mean without enough detail, etc. Okay, so apart from Ganakatarangini, in terms of general history, also Sudhakar Dwivedi has contributed an interesting work. Now, this book is in Hindi. This is Ganit ka Itihas, Pehla Baab Patiganit is the title. I think the second part didn't appear. It's the only one that we have. I mean, second or later parts didn't appear. Now, this is an interesting book. This is available online. You can search for it and look at it. So it's inspired and based on his lectures at the Banaras Government College, which he was teaching. The book is a kind of comprehensive history, I mean, in approach, not in detail. So the book begins with numerals and modes of reckoning in various ancient cultures, apart from the various Indian traditions, includes also from Egypt, Babylonia, Rome, Tibet, and also the Arabs, etc. You can see that he has somewhat poor opinion about the Arabs, which will probably be viewed critically in our time, but that's how it seems to have been at that time in India. The book then goes on to a variety of arithmetical concepts, series summation, first finite series, logarithms, etc. These are descriptions are brief, limiting to whether and how the topic is dealt with by various authors, and some key observations. So various important results and problems have been highlighted in some way. So Fermat's last theorem, for instance, is mentioned. The works of Euler, Lagrange, Kumar are recorded. There are also references to various ancient scriptures, and the style is quite interesting. It's chatty, and though it's somewhat patchy. I mean, like in casual conversation, sort of moves on from one to another thing in some patchy style narrative. However, but makes quite an interesting reading. I strongly recommend to reading, reading it to all the audience. So, in the later part of, I am continuing with the same Ganit Ka Itihas. In the later part, over 40 pages are devoted to a listing of well over 100 mathematical and related personalities. Now, this is not meant to be a list of mathematical personalities. It is the listing of all the people that have figured in the earlier part of the book. So. And brief biographical details are included in various cases. Now, interestingly, the first entry happens to be Khalifa Abbasidi al-Mansur. Whose name you must have come across. It was during his reign that conference was arranged, where there was a delegation from Sindh, which took the work of Mahotsav, and its dissemination at the conference was sort of instrumental in the Indian mathematics getting into the Arab studies. Then it also the entries also include things names like Aristotle, King Ashoka for certain contexts about Then Albert Dürer, Cardin. There's a story about his having committed suicide, which I struck about. This is why I put this exclamation mark. But then from other Indian names, the Jagannath Pandit, you would have heard of. Tulsi Das features in some way. Narayan Pandit is mentioned. About Newton, he says, संसार में सबसे बड़े पंडित गिने जाते हैं. So, on Plato, the author states, गणित पढ़ाने के लिए स्कूल बनाने के यही आदि पुरुष was the first person to bring up an institution purely for mathematics. गणित पढ़ाने के लिए. So there is also one Madhavacharya mentioned, but he is not clearly not the one from Sangamagaram. Okay. Apart from these biographical works, there's another and perhaps more important contribution of Sudhakar Dwivedi is translating and editing of various ancient works, which has sort of built up a treasure for later people to follow. So there's listed here that I don't think I need to read all this. So this starts from, say, Lilavati and Bejaganita of Bhaskaracharya. I also included the period of that work. So the Siddhanta Tattva Viveka of Kamalakara is one of the very important works. From the later part of the Siddhanta tradition. So I think around that point, it sort of matched the works of Bhaskaracharya in appeal. So the Siddhanta Tattva Viveka was one of the very important works to be used for. Then another important one I would highlight is this Trishatika of Sridhara. Sridhara is one of the people, enigmatic scholars in some way. There's been a lot of confusion about his period and also whether he was Jaina or Hindu and so on. And now the controversy seems to have sort of settled, and he's supposed to be from about the from the 8th century, and from the Jaina tradition. And this Trishatika is one of the other other than Mahaviracharya's the Ganita Sara Sangraha that was mentioned, the works of Sridhara, there are two, Trishatika and Pati Ganita is the other one. And the edition of Trishatika was brought out by Sudhakar Dvivedi. Then this includes Brahmasputra Siddhanta of Brahmagupta, then Surya Siddhanta, Vedanga Jyotisha, and so on. There's a whole lot of work he seemed to have done. This continue all through his career in that respect. Let me move on to the last person I want to talk about, and this is Vibhuti Bhushan Datta. He's probably more familiar to everybody because of his two books, source book, which serve as source books in the for ancient Indian mathematics. Vibhuti Bhushan Datta, he was born in a poor family in Chittagong district, now in Bangladesh. He did his BSc in 1912 and MSc in 1914 in Presidency College. He received DSc from the University of Calcutta in 1920 for his work on hydrodynamics. So it's in a way he was sort of mainstream pure mathematician. I mean, mainstream applied mathematician who turned to history. Actually, I have not noted here for want of fear of losing time, but his teacher, Ganesh Prasad, was also greatly interested in history, and he himself wrote books on history. But I'll not go into that. And Ganesh Prasad, it was under the influence of Ganesh Prasad, two people took to history of mathematics. So, and this Vibhuti Bhushan Datta, and the other one is in mind is the co-author of Vibhuti Bhushan Datta, the Adesh Narayan Singh. Both were students of Ganesh Prasad. So, and so after his equivalent, I mean DSc in applied mathematics, he devoted himself to history of mathematics, and something more. He had an ascetic orientation all through. From the childhood himself, he was kind of spiritually oriented in what is said. And then even in terms of accepting the professorship, he was kind of unwilling, but was persuaded because they could not find anybody, etc. And but in 1929, he resigned from the post to pursue philosophy and religion. So, and along the way, of course, he was working in history, especially of mathematics, which I'll talk about a bit. Now, Swami Vidyaranya, this is not another person. It's the also, as I said, after he. Okay, so we'll come to, it's the same person we are talking about, and I'll come to that detail as we go on. So later again, he was persuaded by, after resignation, he was again persuaded by Ganesh Prasad to return to academics, and in 1931, by special invitation, he delivered what were called leadership lectures at the Kolkata University. These lectures were later materialized into the book on the science of the Sulba, which was mentioned in the talk of Dani this morning. So it's one of the references that sort of canonical references to the area. Soon after 1933, he finally retired from the university and went wandering around, living on charity of others and so on. And in 1938, he became a sannyasi. Uh, and that's when he took the name Swami Vidyananda. By this time, in 1930, he had, of course, acquired a great reputation as an authority on history of ancient Indian mathematics. He is well known for the two works which I alluded to. So, jointly with Avdesh Narayan Singh, they named History of Hindu Mathematics source book. Now, so here I think I'll take this occasion to explain something, though it is mentioned as history of Hindu mathematics. It's sort of it includes also the mathematics from the Jainas and so on. So often somehow we tend to conflate Hindu and Jaina mathematics, and but Jaina mathematics has its own identity, which also needs to be sustained. And though today there are in today's talks there is not much reference, I would strongly recommend to people to get to know more about Jaina mathematics as well. So of course included, some of it is included in this, and there is also some other works of Datta, but there's also more to it, which I'll not be other time to say. So, but I just want to emphasize this aspect. The this work it was earlier in two separate volumes, but later it's now more or less the two-volume book. It continues to be a basic reference in history of Indian mathematics, authoritative account on arithmetic and algebra. Okay, so many of the things that we talked today, there's a good amount of literature available in this two-volume book. Apart from the two-volume works, he had also a manuscript on geometry and trigonometry, which, however, remained unpublished for over 40 years. In fact, sometime I think it was sort of lost track of, and people were trying to look for it. But it turned out that Krupashankar Shukla, K.S. Shukla, could get access, got access to that. Maybe had access for it over a long time. The exact circumstances are not quite clear, but finally the end of the story of that is that work was published by Krupashankar Shukla in a series of papers in the name of as the Datta's work, of course, in the Indian Journal of History of Mathematics. So aside from the books and I mean the book in new format, so to speak, Datta, Datta wrote a large number of papers. So writing papers in history of mathematics was not a very standard practice even by that time, but Datta does have a large number of papers, over 40 papers I counted. And so during the period from a short career, because after 47, I think he more or less left the work. He was having become a sannyasi. So during 25 to 47, there are 40 papers, and including some of them during the sannyasi phase. The papers are published in many renowned journals at the time. I not listed, tried to list them here. Their names will not be familiar, may not be familiar in any case. I would especially like to mention two papers which have had a very foundational and important role in and are still widely referred to. So one is on the Bakshali manuscript, which figured in some of the talks today. And there's a very detailed paper on Bakshali manuscript. And another work which I want to emphasize is a paper on Jaina School of Mathematics. Now, on the Jaina School of Mathematics, unfortunately, there's not too much literature as yet, at least in the systematic form that we now would recognize as a work on history of mathematics. And this turns out to be one of the crucial papers for reference. So with that, let me thank you for your attention.